Good morning. Saturday, February 13th, 2021, 8:07 a.m. here in Sarasota, Florida. I'm continuing with a creative impulse, pursuing a creative impulse that happens to be married to some intuition energy in a way that I haven't quite yet followed. The recording is part of it. Choosing to release it is another part of it. And here, picking up pace is deciding through which mediums I'm going to share this particular story, if you will. So this is all really new, and my sense is that this is going to really become and feel a lot clearer than I've managed to do thus far. But this particular story is, I'll go ahead and share what I sense, where I think this is going to be released. So some of you may be familiar with Patreon. Patreon is simply a platform out there where individuals can create their own page, and you can get basically small donations, monthly contributions to your efforts, whatever those may be, however specific you spell them out. It's essentially a way to, in small amounts, to have many people support individuals and small little operations in sort of a new way. I think it's fantastic. I have personally been contributing to one little family, one small 3-person family that's been producing a 13 moon calendar for, I believe they've been doing it over 20 years. I've been supporting them for, I think, 3 years at simply $10 a month. It's minimal, and yet to me, it's so huge. If all of us were to choose just a handful of people to contribute to in this way, it's one of many small steps that can be taken to dramatically change how we support one another, how we fund business, how we step away from these huge, anonymous, big systems that are impossible to manage and control and that are impossible to keep at a human level. This is a one way to totally change that landscape. And it's in a manageable, small way where no one person is completely out a ton of money. So I've been familiar with Patreon for a few years. I hadn't really contemplated until relatively recently establishing my own page. Anybody that's been following me for any amount of time, which is a very, very small number, knows that I've sort of struggled in putting this all together in a succinct, clear way. And I will maintain that struggle will be made more clear why the struggle has taken place, simply because of the number of things that I have been individually working on. And the point that I've sort of been quote unquote stuck on is this centralizing thing to connect them all together. That has become a lot more clear in the past couple of weeks as I've realized that we've got all these different ways: Patreon, GoFundMe, YouTube, Facebook, websites. We've got all these different ways. And I began to realize that if I long ago identified 10 specific storylines of Allison's life that could be told from a spiritual perspective that could meet the work that I'm being called to do. And I've said all along, my story is our story, and it all comes down to the energy. And so by listening to my story, the focus is not intended to remain on Allison's story. There are deep, conscious intentions there to take you within your own story and more, to almost train you energetically to begin to prepare yourself for what it means to live as the multidimensional beings that we all are. And the more open you are to this, the easier it will be. And it's not about forcing anybody, but it is a very different type of storytelling, where each of these 10 storylines, they are all woven together. But what I'm beginning to see and begin to really lay out here is that each storyline is going to be told through one of those aforementioned mediums. And any one story can be followed all on its own. But the more that you listen to all the stories, you'll begin to feel what it is I've been doing for 8 years, which is literally turning my life over to Spirit, to God, to the One, and doing my best to align to that within me, and then to be a conduit of, again, a completely different, more expansive reality. Okay? So with that said, this would be the third recording where I've consciously known when I've turned the recorder on. I don't know what's going to come through, but what I have known, this will be the third recording representing this statement, is that I'm pretty sure this particular storyline is going to be for my Patreon page. And why? Because the Patreon page, more than any of the others, is going to require a donation, right? And I get to decide what that minimum donation is. I support another guy, and his minimum donation is $1. Now, I give him $10 a month too, but some people have as their minimum donation on Patreon $10. And it starts to get murky when you mix the spiritual work with money. But what people don't understand is we are not yet completely separated from the world of money. And it is a really fine line. And it's only something that you can live and experience and feel, and I have had direct experiences with quote unquote spiritual people who claim they're about spirit first, where I have had experiences that absolutely prove to me that when push comes to shove and their back is in the corner, they absolutely were not about spirit first. They were about the dollar first. I'm speaking about two powerful influences in my life for over a decade. I will not reveal their names, but I was intended to go to Ecuador. Anybody that followed the 4 recordings a year ago that I did about that trip that didn't happen and how they handled it revealed to me what they were really about. And from that moment on, I gave them no more attention. I burned their books. I didn't even put their books in my little free library. I will not bash their names because they help a lot of people and they helped me. But when it came down to it, when they had a chance to really show what they were about, they demonstrated that it was more about the dollar than it was about all their teachings. And that was enough for me. So it gets murky. It can get murky when you start mixing any sort of dollar with anything that you call kind of spiritual. And all I can say is you got to follow your heart. And what I vow to do is that anytime I've got dollars involved, I can promise you that I will be transparent with where the dollars are going, and I will always adopt sort of at a minimum this 50-50 attitude. It reminds me of how I was raised when I was a kid. From the point that I can remember, my parents, we had this, and it was a rule until we were 18 years old. All money that we received, 50% went to spendings, 50% went to savings. No matter what it was for, whether we earned it on our own, whether it was birthday money or Christmas money from aunts or uncles or godparents or grandparents, 50-50 is what we split. And that was drilled into us. 50% of your money that you came in went to savings, 50% went to spendings. So for me, 50% of my money that comes in from outside of me, directed towards my work, I will be very transparent in how 50% of that will stay with me personally, and 50% of it will be funneled back out through my work. And most of my work, all of my work has as its components and intentions to have a huge ripple effect for others, well beyond my life. That is the core of my work. Selfishly, that is all I want to do, is help everybody thrive, help everybody be able to help themselves, teach people how to fish, not just hand them over the fish. So Patreon allows me to, and by charging a little bit of money, what that does is, from my perspective, it sifts out a certain degree, it sifts out and filters a certain part of the audience, right? If you offer something for free, anybody can pop on in. If you charge, even if it's just $1 or $5 or $10, it filters. You're not going to get necessarily anybody. You're only going to get at least a higher percentage of people that are genuinely interested in what you want to say and are not going to contribute just to attack you and knock you down. And I've had a lot of way more energy knocking me down than being in my corner the past 8 years. Or more than anything, I've had just indifferent energy. No one really understanding what the hell that I'm doing. And I'm trying to say that in my human form, we need one another in human form. From the spiritual perspective, everything that we have, everything that we need is from within. But we did not come down here in human form to act in isolation. We came to help one another. We came to work with one another. And so I'm trying to be much more clear and direct about what I perceive that the character of Allison, what she could really benefit from to help with her work, and then tell what that help will directly go towards. And right now, what I've been trying to say is, more than anything, I just need the energy of attention. I just need a few people that actually care to feed the story, because what that does is that little bit of attention helps clarify the avenues for me creatively and pulls the intuition. It sort of all works together in this harmonizing way. And through Patreon, it allows me to filter and speak to people who are statistically more likely to actually care and be supportive, which then allows me to reveal stories that I feel are a little bit more intimate. And I need people that, are going to give me the benefit of the doubt that, one, listen, anytime I say something, I'm being very careful with how I say it and the words that I choose. But I will say and repeat time and time again, this is so much more than what words alone can express. On top of that, the words of our human language, it's unbelievable. Words that are synonyms in our human language mean completely different things when you start talking about the nuanced level of what they represent energetically. And I am very sensitive and aware of that. So it's very easy for certain things that I express, very easy to manipulate and twist it. And especially in a format like this, where I don't have a back and forth yet. This format is still me putting it out there with no questions, no opportunity for direct questions about, that are geared to clarify something. So I need space for people to give me the benefit of the doubt, to trust what I say is true for my life. I am coming from love. I am intending only love. I am working to be a huge example and trailblazer for the new version of Earth based in cooperation, abundance, and love. That is my truth. No one can debate that and make that a debate or an argument with me. No one gets to debate what I'm claiming my truth is. And the interesting thing is, for a lot of years, I gave that power away. And I gave that power away because at my foundation, some of my closest relationships never saw or allowed me to give voice to my own opinion, my own life, my own truth. And I didn't know any better. So I accepted and took their look at my life through their eyes, what they believed was right for me, what they wanted me to choose. And it was foundational. This was immediate family relationships, most notably my father and my brothers, and one brother more so than the other. And again, this isn't meant to attack them, but I cannot not talk about how important this is when you go to try to break foundational patterns. And a lot of us have some of our biggest hurts were rooted in our immediate families. And why? Because as I said before, our souls choose our families. And overcoming the obstacles that we chose to introduce to our lives right at the onset is absolutely one of many goals that we set out for our souls to overcome, to expand from, to learn from in the evolution of ourselves at our soul level through this particular lifetime. And I set some really challenging obstacles, the least of which being the dynamic between the masculine and feminine energy within myself, and then closely related to that is what my attraction point is and was, or I should say was and is, with the opposite gender, with that, I should say the opposite energy, because we all have masculine and feminine within us. And I know a lot of men that have a lot of feminine energy that funnels through them. And we are being called to balance that within ourselves, which then will allow us to create a world that represents a balanced energy and not one that represents only one aspect of that. The old world was white, male created, ... Not debatable, not opinion, fucking fact. That being the case, a world that comes together to be created with male and female energy equally being given a shot to contribute to what the operation of how we interact with one another, what these systems look like, how we do business, how all of it. Once you get that female input, it becomes a very different game. My personal experience has been very little reflection of men being able to hold space for the female aspect of things that a lot of male brains are just not wired to be able to see or understand. Certainly not as easily or as naturally as how women's brains are wired. I'm not saying these men don't exist. I'm not saying that these men aren't even in my life, because I've seen and witnessed many of these powerful men. I'm talking about they're not shying away from responsibility. They're accountable. They stand up for certain things. Real men, real women. Not afraid to take a voice, not afraid to stand up and have principles and have integrity. Take a stand, suffer consequences for taking that stand, standing up for what matters to them. I've seen these men in mass, mostly on the Iron Man circuit. I've seen them in their relationships with very strong women and hold space for the women. So I've seen very strong men, and I'm friends with some of what I would say men that absolutely clearly are holding beautiful space for their partners as powerful equals. But I personally don't have an intimate relationship with these friends, right? I have a work relationship with these guys. I personally, my set point, my personal attraction point of the men that are close to me, keeping in mind that my social life is very small. Very small. Because I came here to work. My soul's mission is to work. And I'm not going to go off on the tangent on, that's okay. Most people aren't jealous of the lack of, I don't go out, I don't party, I don't do that, and that's okay. But what that means is my social life and the relationships that I have outside of work relationships are very limited now. And since my awakening, that number has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Where at present here in 2021, that inner circle, the people that really know what's going on in my world, what I'm working for, who can hold space for it, who see it, who love me, who support me. Honest to God, it's on one hand. It's on half of the fingers in one hand. Very few number of people. And here's the thing. I don't need people to like me. And that part's kind of hard because the old story of Allison did. She didn't know that she did, but she was very, very afraid of abandonment. Again, going back to her home issues of divorce. She was very, very afraid of upsetting people and taking a real stance, right? So I did, in some degree, I was afraid of people not liking me. And in some degree, I did hold myself back because I knew to what extent that an opinion that I had or something that I wanted to state or an idea that I had would make somebody uncomfortable. And if I made them uncomfortable, my experience had been from everybody close to me, when I really began to kind of come into my own, it scared the shit out of people in one way or the other. It intimidated them, it threatened them, it scared them. And so I just learned to hold that back. I can't hold that back any longer. And I perceive that through my story to mean that I am coming into my woman. Now, I first started to come into this, not my little girl energy that can hang with the guys, hang with the men. My little girl energy could hang with the men, literally, playing their game. But my woman, coming into having an opinion, having ideas, having a voice, deserving to be heard, not wanting to settle for certain things in my work life, certain things in my personal life. I deserve to be loved. I deserve to be valued. This is all very new for me at 45 years old. I'm changing my set point. I'm changing the pattern. And nothing in me says that this is a story that's meant to be kept just between me. Because I know too many other females for whom aspects of my story are very similar in their lives. Because if we look, we see stories of successful women playing that male-created game. We see that all the time. But I'm sorry, and this is not intended to have judgment. I'm just trying to state a fact. In order to succeed at that game, you have to shut down a good part of the feminine energy. That is something I could never do. We haven't seen a world yet. What does it look like when you've got this woman who's got tons of masculine energy, but also who's not going to deny her feminine energy, and she's going to come to the table within those powerful masculine energy conglomerates and stand equally as tall in her feminine energy. And having men that are able to support that. We don't see examples of that. And listen, there's a lot that's going to come out about Hollywood here in the near future, but there are so many positive things within. You can't just paint this one broad stroke that everybody in Hollywood is evil, that everybody in politics is evil, you can't. There's a lot of corruption and a lot of dark, mostly at the tippy top of all these structures and hierarchies. But within Hollywood and the storytelling and the creative craft of telling stories and making movies and making television programs, I'm not going to lie, I can't change the past. They profoundly affected me in positive ways. And I'm not going to just eliminate that because of the dark things that we're going to learn about Hollywood. And one of the most powerful recent television programs was Madam Secretary with Téa Leoni and Tim Daly. And the way that their couple, how they were portrayed, as silly as this may be to reference something political, to reference something fictional, the way that they portrayed that particular couple and how Tim Daly's character stood behind his wife and wasn't this wimpy guy at all. That was one of the best portrayals I've ever seen of trying to give an example of what it looks like to have strong masculine energy with strong feminine energy that is just more balanced in both the male and the female. And that is what I know my work can benefit from right now, in the here and now. I need that masculine reflection. And I need it I keep coming back to Iron Man because Iron Man is presently the example in my life that has reflected back thus far sort of the highest version of me. But it is still so far from the essence of who I am because, one, it exists in a money-only structure of doing business where all that mattered was the money. Two, because, well, that right there speaks mostly. But two, because of the aforementioned, there's no spiritual aspect directly to the business side of it. And that might seem like a paradox or an oxymoron, but I don't think so. That's what I think in no small way I'm here to do, is to integrate more spiritual in the business. I love business. I love being efficient. And I am good in that 3D world in managing money. In fact, I would argue and put myself up against anybody in terms of how far I can get a dollar to go. And my projects are going to show that. And I am very close now to beginning to jump in to where my projects all are at, and I'm weaving it all together. And I am very close to being able to show how efficient I am in that 3D world of business. But I need an opportunity to integrate spirit into the 3D world of business. And in the Ironman world, that spirit side isn't there. Therefore, in an arbitrary way of describing it, half of me is not allowed to be expressed. There's no space for that half of me to express. But in that world, man, is there a powerful reflection of me, and I'm a peon in that world. I'm a nobody in that world, which I actually like. Because as I mentioned 2 recordings ago, it's about having the furthest ripple effect as quietly as possible, as anonymously as possible. So that seems a little more, paradoxical, because here I am, Allison's story, and Allison's going to come at you from all these different avenues. And there's just nothing I can do but try to say, stick with it. I'm going to make it our story from my story as quickly as possible. That's all I can say, is that you follow along, and if you can trust that, I promise you that is going to happen very shortly after Allison's story has this quote-unquote breakthrough point. But the Ironman world, those guys see me as an equal playing their game. But as soon as I start to try to integrate or talk about anything that is outside of that realm, they don't, they're not rude about it, but they just, nobody gives it serious thought. No one gives it serious thought. And boy, have I imagined what just 1 or 2 of those guys, not just the Ironman guys, but just a man's energy, a man, as I said before, a strong, responsible, accountable guy that's, strong man that's able to hold the space for where I'm at and my ideas, and to actually be in my corner rooting for me. Not putting me down, not telling me why I'm screwing it up, not telling me all the reasons why my ideas won't work, not pointing out, that's what the close men in my relationship, in my life have done. And that's what I accepted as love and support. And I'm not saying they don't really love and support me. That's how they show love and support. And hey, I've tried to communicate, that doesn't feel like love and support. I understand you guys love and support me. This doesn't feel like it, and no longer am I going to settle for that being love, accepting that as love and support when I deserve better. So forgive me, but I'm going to keep moving on until I find the masculine energy to reflect back to me these ideas when they're not threatened, when they're not intimidated, when they're not getting triggered and then turning their triggers onto me, but when they can just try and actually make an effort to try to see what it is I've done already, but more importantly, the greater vision. So this particular storyline, I think, is going to be revealed on Patreon, and this is very much this gender. It's the male-female energy. It's the dance, and more specifically, it's sort of a very painful but brilliant and beautiful, powerful, empowering shift in my personal world. So it's a very intimate story, but I think it's essential to share, because I don't think I'm far from the only woman that has experienced a lack of being able to fully express her woman, her power, and actually have that masculine energy somewhere in her life to support and to reflect back to her. And again, I want that. I can say that I need it, but like I've said before, from the spiritual perspective, I've got that within. I can go from within, but we are here to cooperate. We are here to help one another. And I can very clearly now state exactly what I perceive myself to need. And then once I get what I think I need, then, only time will tell to what degree I was accurate in that. And right now, more than anything, what I need, at least in small part in my life, are a few men to reflect back to me. But in order to attract that relationship, I first have to be in this place within myself. I have to be self-loving and giving myself what I desire to see outside of me reflected back to me by said masculine energy. And that brings me full back to Patreon, where I imagine targeting some of my closest woman friends and inviting them to support me through Patreon in small amounts per month and to give their attention to this story. And my hypothesis is believing that they will benefit from this, because I can almost guarantee that at least one aspect of this particular side of my story, but more likely multiple aspects, will be speaking to what they've experienced and possibly are struggling with as well. And the goal is to help us all draw in the most positive reflections of our best versions, balanced reflections. So it has to begin with me giving myself this, me not having doubt, me seeing my greatest version. And there is, and what makes it, and I'm going to finish this, what makes it most beautiful is the woman with whom I imagine sharing this story directly in 1 hour, 1 to 1.5 hour segments to release on Patreon is one of my, who's part of my inner circle. I think I'm part of her inner circle too, but she's part of my inner circle, which is very small. And I met her on the Iron Man circuit. And I have said before, no accidents, no coincidences. There is no way we met in that world and have grown as close as we've grown accidentally. And she is the one, through coaching sessions one-on-one, that she and I having this space to connect directly about this story through and being released on Patreon. And right now it's an intuition. I feel like it's going to be a really powerful, beautiful story. And that's where I'm taking this particular storyline. So that's the thought. It's not created yet. This isn't up on Patreon yet. Obviously, it's just being recorded. But that's where I believe this is going. And then slowly I'll introduce the other storylines on through their specific mediums. So again, I invite you to follow along. I thank you if you give this a listen, because that is attention and that does feed the work. And the work, I promise you, is well beyond just Allison. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.